Part 6. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mocienu. Chapter 51. Muchu's eyes flashed with cold light, and his left hand moved in the air. The misty frost condensed into a long sword in an instant. Muchu bent his knees and squatted slightly. He exerted force with his right arm. The crystal blue blade collided with the serrated double blades of the mantis. The double blades of the mantis were actually directly blocked by Muchu's sword, and could not move forward at all. At the same time, Muchu held the condensed ice longsword with his backhand, and the blade turned outward and pressed against his arm. His elbows collided backwards, and the sharp blade of the longsword directly pierced into the mouthparts of the giant cockroach behind him. The giant cockroach roared violently, and the dark green smelly liquid splashed out of its mouthparts, dripping on the ground, and even the sand was corroded into a huge pit. Muchu held the tang sword tightly in his right hand, and a huge force vibrated out from the tang sword. The giant mantis was shaken back step by the huge force, and its limbs were unstable and fell into the sand pit. As Muchu turned around, the long knife was pulled out of the giant cockroach's mouth. At this moment, a ferocious two-headed hound knocked away the zombies and rushed towards Muchu, roaring and biting. Muchu snorted coldly and jumped into the air. The ice surface under his feet suddenly rose and floated. A long spear condensed in Muchu's hand. Muchu threw it violently, and the ice spear flashed a little cold light in the air, nailing the giant cockroach to the sand. The two-headed hound that pounced on the side saw that the attack was suspended in the air, looked up at Muchu and roared, with violent eyes. Muchu was standing quietly in the air at this moment, with the roaring zombies under his feet, like a peerless war god who looked down on all living beings. Fighting 3 A-level heretics with his own strength. Everyone present was shocked by Muchu's heroic record, and their eyes were full of incredible colors. Didn't Muchu just get promoted to Class A? The fat man couldn't believe that the scene was something that a newbie could do. Is this the talent of the top awakeners of the elemental system? It's so terrifying. Chen Weiguo erected a barrier in front of him to block the zombies that were attacking him. He fired fiercely with the rifle in his hand and was amazed at Muchu's performance. What a joke. Ma-kun, didn't you say he was just a Class B awakener? This TM person knocked down 3 Class A monsters. Are you asking us to die? Seeing Muchu's powerful strength, Ma-kun's companions couldn't sit still and stood up to question Ma-kun. No matter how strong they were, they couldn't break through to the A-level. Even the fact that they could catch these heretics was mostly due to Brother Xiong's credit. How is it possible? Ma-kun clenched his fists and opened his eyes wide. He couldn't believe that Muchu, who was showing his might in front of him, was the enemy he had been trying to kill. This guy is quite interesting. Jin Xiong, who was originally sitting on the rock watching the show, saw Muchu's powerful fighting power and his eyes lit up, and he finally showed interest. He stood up slowly, and his muscles moved like a snake. Without waiting for Ma-kun and others to react, Jin Xiong's sturdy body jumped directly towards the sand pit. Ma-kun and his companions looked at each other, and the tattooed man asked Ma-kun, "What should we do now?" Ma-kun looked at the team members who were struggling below, and gritted his teeth. "What else can we do? Let's go down and get rid of that kid's accomplices first, and then we will kill Muchu together. I have the pollen of hidden insects here, you all apply it, so that those zombie heretics will not notice our existence within a quarter of an hour." Tianlai Novel Network. WC, Ma-kun, you really spent a lot of money this time. Ma-kun gritted his teeth and said, "Stop talking nonsense, I will get the biggest share of the resources after killing them." Just like that, after a brief discussion, the few people swooped down towards the direction of Muchu and others. Muchu was fighting with several terrifying A-level heretics at this moment, with smoke and blood everywhere. Those low-level zombies did not dare to approach under the terrifying pressure of the energy, so they rushed towards Wei Linger and others. Suddenly, a sturdy figure punched out of the fog. Mewtwo cut off one of the mutant cockroach's tentacles with a knife, and then moved slightly, dodging to the side. With a bang, a big hole was blasted out under Mewtwo's feet. Jin Xiang walked out of the big hole. At this moment, he had taken off his shirt, revealing his muscles and fat. He was broad and strong, and his whole body was covered with old scars. It can be seen that Jin Xiang was also a fierce character before the end of the world. Jin Xiang grinned at Mewtwo, punched his fists, and his eyes were full of wanton arrogance. "Come on, kid, let me see how powerful you are. What I like most is to strangle a genius like you in the cradle." At the same time, the team members on the battlefield were also in crisis. The Fat Man took the lead in fighting with the Flying Knife Man of the Killer Mat. The Fat Man's ability is known for its speed, but the knife-throwing man only needs to stand still and manipulate countless knives to stab the Fat Man. The Fat Man can only dodge hastily, and he must also be alert to the zombies that may appear around him. He can't spare any time to attack. On the other side, Chen Weiguo was blocked by the Tattooed Man. Chen Weiguo was an important meat shield in the team, and his only firepower output was the rifle on his back. There was a square barrier in front of Chen Weiguo, and he fired wildly at the Tattooed Man with the rifle in his hand. But the Tattooed Man showed no fear at all. His body turned blue and iron, and his body seemed to be cast in copper and iron. The bullets hit him and bounced off instantly. The Tattooed Man walked towards Chen Weiguo with a grim smile. The pressure on Wei Linger and the Crazy Squirrel was even greater. The Lizard Man transformed by Ma Kun was extremely fast, powerful, and had a terrifying self-healing ability. And the Short Man seemed to have inherited some mutant genes of reptiles. He had amazing jumping ability and flexible body shape, and his white steel teeth were indestructible. Fortunately, the Crazy Squirrel's body was tough, and he did not fall down even after being injured many times. Wei Linger relied on his flexible body to attack Ma Kun and the others. But the Lizard Man transformed by Ma Kun had good defense and strong self-healing ability. The Short Man's flexibility when jumping was no less than Wei Linger, and even better. Wei Linger was almost killed by his counter-attack several times. After a few rounds of this, Wei Linger was exhausted, and the giant squirrel fell to the side with wounds all over its body, and it was no longer able to act as a meat shield. The super-fast movement of the Fat Man seemed to be a joke to the Tattooed Man, who taunted him, "My flying knife is coated with deadly snake venom, so don't get scratched by it by accident, agile little Fat Man." Damn it! The Fat Man cursed in his heart, and his dodging became clumsy. On the other side, Chen Weiguo held up a heavy barrier shield, struggling to resist the Tattooed Man's continuous attacks, and had no time to care about others. At this point, all the team members except Mewtwo were in a difficult battle, and they were about to collapse. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 52. A huge boulder next to Mewtwo was shattered by a powerful punch. Shirtless and muscular, Jin Xiang walked out of the scattered smoke and dust, with a crazy fighting spirit in his eyes. "My power is very simple, but it is also the most practical." As Jin Xiang spoke, billowing white smoke actually came out of his body. This is a characteristic that only appears when the energy and blood in the whole body are boiling to its peak. Jin Xiang's fists were so huge that the old calluses on them were clearly visible. I saw Jin Xiang punching in the direction of Xiangmuqiu. The strong wind of the punch made the air buzz. Mewtwo dodged and hit the ground in front of him with his fist. A huge crater was instantly created in the mine. Unparalleled strange power. My superpower is the ultimate strength. I can punch through a house with just one fist. Jin Xiang's figure was incomparably majestic, but his figure was actually quite flexible. When the wind hit his feet, he flew in front of Mewtwo. A pair of fleshy fists flickered and continued to attack Mewtwo, hitting his vital points with every move. Mu Chiu's figure swayed from side to side, dodging Jin Xiang's fatal fists by accident or coincidence every time. Mu Chiu could even feel the whistling wind of the fist in her ears. It's interesting. Mu Chiu calmly dodged Jin Xiang's fierce attack. Seeing the majestic fighting spirit on the latter's face, Mu Chiu suddenly smiled and stopped. Jin Xiang obviously noticed the stagnation of Mu Chiu's figure, but how could he care about it at the moment? He grabbed hold of Mu Chiu's flaw and concentrated his energy to strike at Mu Chiu's heavenly spirit with a punch. But Mu Chiu didn't flinch, grinned, and punched out with the same punch. Two fists, one big and one small, collided in the air, and the powerful fist force swept up huge waves, even knocking down some low-level zombies around them to the ground. The moment the two fists clashed, Jin Xiang's expression changed drastically. Mu Chiu's footsteps stayed on the same spot without moving at all, while Jin Xiang actually took several steps back, and his figure was dazed for a while before he calmed down. "You kid." Holding his sore wrist, Jin Xiang looked at Mu Chiu with eyes that could no longer remain calm. In the collision just now, the one who was clearly at a disadvantage was him, an A-level awakened person with unparalleled power. Mu Chiu's strength was actually greater than his. Jin Xiang stabilized his mind, put away the contempt in his heart, and looked at Mu Chiu with a cautious look on his face. "Very good, you are worthy of my full strength." I saw Jin Xiang's muscles quivering like a snake, and the strange energy in his body began to work crazily in his internal organs. Soon, the white steam coming out of his body began to rise rapidly, and even his body surface showed a strange deep red color. At this moment, the B-level mutant zombie felt the vigorous blood in Jin Xiang's body, and roared and bit at Jin Xiang's strong body. Jin Xiang rolled his eyes and punched out with his steaming muscular arm. An unparalleled punch wrapped in sand and dust directly blew the zombie's head open. At this moment, several A-level heretic monsters that Mu Chiu had repelled earlier had wounds and blood on their bodies, and they all surrounded Mu Chiu with red eyes. At this moment, they were all angered by Mu Chiu. They even ignored Jin Xiang on the side and attacked Mu Chiu with the force of encirclement. The light of the sword, the shadow of the fist, and the bloody and sharp teeth seemed to tear Mu Chiu into pieces in the next second. Mu Chiu. Lu Qingfei couldn't help but scream when she saw that she was surrounded by 4 A-level beings in the steel fence and was in danger. Any A-level awakened person will only end up being torn apart in the face of such a terrifying lineup, not to mention that Jin Xiang is the best even among the A-level awakened people in Yuhei base. At the critical moment, Lu Qingfei suddenly realized that her left hand was empty, and an orange figure had already run towards Mu Chiu. Chi. I saw a girl in an orange-red goldfish suit rushing into the tide of corpses regardless of her own safety, and not far away was Mu Chiu, who was surrounded by a pack of wolves. The other members of the team are already stretched thin and cannot withstand the strong offensive of Ma Kun and his party. But when he saw Chi rushing into the tide of corpses alone, even though he didn't understand what he meant, he still tried his best to escort Chi to Mu Chiu's side. And the cost of doing so is extremely heavy. Chen Weiguo directly removed the barrier in front of him and instead erected a barrier shield as high as one person to protect Lu Qi. Seeing this opportunity, the tattooed man punched Chen Weiguo on the neck. Chen Weiguo's brain suddenly went blank and he flew far away. Fatty and Wei Linger gave up their original fight and fought back all the zombies that rushed towards Chi. But this made Ma Kun and his team seize the opportunity. The fat man was directly stabbed by several flying knives. The blades were smeared with poison, and he immediately fell to the ground in severe pain. Wei Linger was also whipped away by Ma Kun's giant lizard tail. Already exhausted, she even exited the cat state. The squirrel beside her was also jumped down by the short man, and a large piece of flesh was bitten off the squirrel's thigh. Dripping with blood, shrunk and passed out next to Wei Linger. At this point, all members of the squad were defeated except for Mu Chiu. Ma Kun looked at Wei Linger and others who were lying on the ground and were being slaughtered, but he said to his companions behind him, let's deal with Mu Qiu first, and then take care of these people. On the other side, Mu Qiu, who was surrounded by many A-level monsters, also felt a little headache. Although his ice power is extremely powerful and has many wonderful uses, it seems a bit stretched when facing such a large number of A-level heretics. Just as he was considering whether to release some of the power of the Flame Demon Lord, an orange-red figure ran towards him from behind. The giant cockroach's mouthparts sprayed dark green corrosive juice, and it danced its tentacles towards Yui. Mu Qiu's body swayed, and the ice mist in his hand condensed into a crystal blue dagger, which was suddenly inserted into the giant cockroach's carapace. The giant cockroach roared and fell backwards, but Mu Qiu had already embraced the girl in his arms. Yui. Yui raised her delicate angel-like face, held Mu Qiu's handsome and beautiful face with her jade hands, looked into each other's eyes, and called softly, "Qiu, please. Use me." Mu Qiu smiled, stroked the girl's soft pink hair, and replied in her ear, "Okay." Almost at the same time as Mu Qiu responded, an invisible aura began to surround the two of them. On Mu Qiu's chest, the king's mark produced after devouring the void genome began to flash with an inexplicable luster. A series of strands of sequence that looked like genetic composition began to entangle the two people's bodies. Mu Qiu's eyes instantly turned into a deep red, and they looked at each other with the deep red pupils of Yui Qi, as if a chain of order turned into a crystal white strand of strands flowing around the two people. Mu Qiu raised his right hand and gently floated on the girl's graceful chest. Just when everyone was confused, a scene that stunned everyone happened. A bright white hole appeared on Yui Qi's chest, and there seemed to be an infinite void inside. The gorgeous silver strands instantly entangled Mu Qiu's arm. Then, Mu Qiu actually put his right hand deep into the endless hole on Yui Qi's chest. Yui Qi moaned, and her soft waist was held in Mu Qiu's arms, with her eyes closed, as if she had lost consciousness. Mu Qiu pulled his arm out, and something seemed to be pulled out of the infinite white void. In an instant, a dazzling curtain of light rose up around the two of them, illuminating the sky. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 53. Then, what the hell is that? Everyone looked at the soaring light pillar that penetrated the sky, and the powerful fluctuations even caused chaos in the clouds into a whirlpool. They were shocked for a moment without knowing why. But then, a scene that shocked them even more appeared. Mu Qiu was seen holding her sister in her left arm, and her right hand was raised high, holding a giant long sword that was as tall as a person. No, compared to a long sword, the weapon in Mu Qiu's hand is more like a terrifying broadsword, with a black-gray hilt, a ferocious silver-blue blade, and the top of the blade is shaped like a blade. It looks domineering and has a disharmonious beauty. The length of this huge sword alone is 2 meters. The specific form can be searched on Baidu, I won't describe it too much here. The giant sword shone with silvery white light, and the smooth and sharp blade exuded a destructive and terrifying aura. Then, what is that? Even Wei Linger and others were intimidated by this powerful formation. They just saw Mu Qiu inserting his hand into the white hole on Chi-Chi's chest before pulling out such a hideous-looking weapon. The terrifying huge sword. No, this is probably his last trump card. Jin Xiong's eyes narrowed, with a hint of horror deep in his pupils. From that giant sword, he felt a terrifying and destructive aura, and even he felt afraid. Ma Kun was the first to react. Hurry up and come together, don't let him have a chance to react. I don't believe it. With so many people together, they can't kill him. Ma Kun and others rushed towards Mu Qiu, and the surviving heretical monsters also rushed towards Mu Qiu without fear of death. At this moment, it was like thousands of horses galloping, and the land where the mine was located was shaken by the alliance formed by the Awakened Ones and the Heretics, and these hundreds of monsters had only one target, the black-robed figure under the sky-high light curtain. Is this the power of the void? Mewtwo looked at the huge void sword in her hand that was as tall as a person with a calm expression. This was the power called void hidden in Chi-Chi's body. The heart is embodied and extracted, and it is woven from the human heart, the crown of sin. He looked down at the girl in his arms, only to find that Chi-Chi had lost consciousness and fainted in his arms. Mewtwo kissed the girl's forehead gently and said softly, "Have a good rest and leave the rest to me." Feeling the abundant power in her body and overlooking the hordes of heretics running toward her below, Mewtwo still had a calm smile on her face. This is a powerful ability that is completely different from the devouring ability. Although it does not have the world-destroying power of the Fire Demon Lord, the bonus given to Mewtwo is completely different from the devouring ability. Mewtwo held Chi-Chi in her arms with her left hand, and held a 2-meter-long giant sword in her right hand. As Mewtwo moved, pieces of ice crystals appeared under her feet. Mewtwo was seen waving the void sword in his hand, the blade flashed, and a dazzling silver-white arc cut through the sky. Not good. Feeling the fatal fluctuation contained in the silver horse training, Ma Kun and others quickly stopped and used their strongest defensive forms to resist the attack. Even the strongest Jin Xiang had to cross his arms and his body surface turned abnormally red. This was his final move to squeeze physical energy in exchange for a steel body. But those heretics who are not afraid of death will naturally not stop their bloodthirsty pace. Whoosh! The silver-white narrow blade sliced through, and the air seemed to be still at this moment. The next second, only a bang was heard, and a sound like a mountain collapsing and the earth cracking resounded throughout the world. Everyone turned around and saw that a mine made of gravel and rock not far behind was split in half by this blade. As for the heretics who came to fight against Mewtwo, a line of blood appeared out of thin air on their bodies, and then with a pop, their bodies were abruptly split in half and torn apart. The blood of hundreds of monsters spurted and splashed at the same time. The mine instantly became like a river of blood, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. Only a few A-level heretics withstood this terrifying blow, but all of them were injured, with panic and fear in their eyes. The power of the sword caused hundreds of heretic monsters to lie down on their heads. Are you kidding? How can this kind of power be an A-level awakened person? The fat man was lying on the ground, looking at Mewtwo in front of him like a god descending from heaven. His eyes were full of disbelief. Then he asked his companions in a low voice. "We shouldn't be dead now, right?" Wei Ling's eyes also flashed with brilliance, and then she nodded solemnly. "As long as Mewtwo is here, nothing will happen to us." Ma Kun and others were obviously not feeling well at this time. There was a bright blood mark on Jin Xiang's arms, and blood was still flowing out. Ma Kun even had an arm cut off by a blade. Although the lizard man has a strong self-healing ability, it is obvious that he will not be able to regenerate the severed limb for a while. The flying knife man had dozens of flying knives standing in front of him the moment the silver-white sword passed by him. However, he was obviously powerless to resist this B-level heretic who could kill him with one strike. He was decapitated by the void sword, and his blood was spread across the sky. Although the short man with lustful eyes was agile, Mewtwo's blade was much faster than his reaction. He could only watch the gorgeous silver streak gradually enlarge in front of his eyes, and his body was cut into two halves in an instant. The only one left was the tattooed man who could turn his body into iron skin and barely resisted this shocking blow. At this moment, he looked at Mewtwo breathlessly, with horror and fear in his eyes. "MD Ma Kun, I'm going to be killed here by you today." The tattooed man turned his head and looked at Ma Kun, cursing in his mouth. If he knew that Mewtwo's strength was so terrifying, he would never have gone through this. "Don't make a fuss." Jin Xiang spoke in a rare angry voice, looking at Mewtwo vigilantly. "This energy has far exceeded the A-level, and is only a hair's breadth away from the S level. Although I don't know where he got this giant sword from, he can't always maintain this state. I guess he has already done his best to swing the giant sword. Ma Kun's mind was the most flexible, and he instantly understood what Jin Xiang meant. When his strength is exhausted, we will catch him and force him to tell us the origin of this giant sword. An awakener who is only one step away from S level. Everyone was shocked. What kind of power could allow Mu Qiu, an awakener who had just entered A level, to have the ability comparable to S level? But the next second, Jin Xiang's plan obviously failed. Mu Qiu stepped on the ice crystals, and his figure was as fast as the wind. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the giant cockroach. The several-foot-long ferocious sword accompanied by the silver-white order chain chopped down at the head of the giant cockroach. The seriously injured cockroach was directly split in half, and the dark green blood spurted out like a fountain. With just one knife, a powerful A-level heretic was directly split in half. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 54. The giant cockroach's huge body was split into two halves, and the sound of it falling to the ground resounded throughout the venue. A powerful A-level heretic was torn into two halves before it could even last a round under Mu Qiu's sword. A gust of wind came from behind him like thunder, but Mu Qiu seemed unaware of it. It was not until a cold light was close to his face that Mu Qiu waved his hand and held the giant sword horizontally in front of him. A gorgeous disk of light suddenly appeared on the blade, and the giant mantis's serrated double knives made a swish sound in the air and instantly chopped on the disk of light. The two collided, and the light curtain that seemed as thin as a cicada's wing did not move at all. On the contrary, the mutant mantis, as tall as a giant, was shocked and staggered to the ground. The mantis's scarlet compound eyes opened wide, and its dorsal wings flapped and were about to fly away. But Mu Qiu would never give it this opportunity. A blue sword blade accompanied by a silver-white streak was swung out, directly cutting off the dorsal wings of the giant mantis. The ferocious blade was like a giant dragon flying across the sky. The mantis's pair of serrated double blades cracked in an instant. Then Mu Qiu jumped up and cut off the mantis's head with one knife. The two-headed hound not far behind felt the vast energy vortex around Mu Qiu, looked at the corpse of the giant cockroach not far away, lowered its head, and fled with a mournful cry. A cold light flashed in Mu Qiu's eyes, and his left arm holding Yui Qi moved slightly. A ball of ice mist exploded from the palm of his hand, hitting the two-headed hound's hind legs like a water bomb, and the hound's hind legs were instantly frozen. In this moment of delay, Mu Qiu had stepped on the ice crystal and arrived in front of the two-headed hound. With one slash, the two heads became two heads, and a blue crystal core with blood fell to the ground. Ma Kun was shocked when he saw this scene. Seeing Mu Qiu holding a ferocious giant sword and killing people everywhere, how could he be exhausted and about to fall down? Mu Qiu flashed to the side of the tattooed man with blue iron skin, and the tattooed man was no longer arrogant. He was seriously injured by a blade, so he had no ability to fight back at this moment. He staggered to the ground and kept retreating. "You, don't come over, I'm from Shenlong Society." Before he finished speaking, a head fell from the air. The blood on the neck of the headless corpse spurted like a fountain, and the blood on the ground seemed to have condensed into a river of blood. Noisy. Mu Qiu showed disdain on his face, and then slowly walked to the last survivors of the group, Ma Kun and Jin Xiang. Ma Kun had a deep blood stain on his chest, and one of his arms was missing, and the broken limb was still bleeding. But he didn't care about his serious injuries now. Looking at Mu Qiu who was walking towards him, he cried miserably, "Mu Qiu, we are all members of Shenglonghui, and Brother Xiang is a capable cadre under Boss Wang. If anything happens, Boss Wang will never let you go." Seeing that Mu Qiu's face was expressionless, Ma Kun hurriedly said, "Boss Wang is one of the three guardians of Yuhei. You can't afford to offend a destructive level strongman. Why don't we each take a step back? Mu Chiu's figure passed by Ma Kun. Ma Kun's eyes suddenly showed a look of joy, and his wretched face was squeezed into a chrysanthemum. Just as he was thinking about saying something to compliment Mu Chiu, he suddenly felt a chill in his chest. Ma Kun looked down and saw a crystal blue ice cone piercing his chest, with blood constantly flowing from it. Ma Kun's pupils were full of horror. He turned his head to look at Mu Chiu's back, but the blood gushing out of his throat made him speechless. Ma Kun's eyes gradually lost focus, and then the boundless darkness came. Mu Chiu retracted the arm that released the ice cone and hugged Yui, who was sleeping peacefully in his arms, tighter. He never took Ma Kun seriously from beginning to end, just a jumping clown. Jin Xiang licked the blood flowing between his arms, looked at Mu Chiu who was walking towards him, stood up, and his expression was indifferent, as if he was not the one experiencing a life and death crisis. He was not like Ma Kun who was praying for his life, and he had no time to think about the reason for Mu Chiu's sudden increase in strength. There was only one way to survive now. There was no other way, only to fight. Jin Xiang said in a deep voice, holding that woman, "Are you looking down on me?" Jin Xiang has experienced countless challenges and life and death tests, but only this opponent has such a casual attitude towards him. Holding a woman in his arms, it is obvious that he cannot exert his full combat power. Even if it is a life and death battle, in Jin Xiang's view, this is also a great contempt for him. Mu Chiu's steps are slow, as if he is afraid of waking up the sleeping beauty in his arms. A slightly contemptuous voice came from his mouth. Well. This short word instantly made Jin Xiang furious. His muscles began to bulge high, and white steam rose from his back like mist. Mu Chiu. The furious Jin Xiang's fighting spirit reached its peak in an instant, and the temperature of his body surface continued to rise, turning red at a speed visible to the naked eye. The texture of the muscles and the blue veins under the skin are clearly visible. At this moment, Jin Xiang seems to be standing at the peak of human power, like a muscle monster covered in human skin. Jin Xiang swung his fist, and the powerful force of his fist came towards Mu Chiu with a feeling of breaking the wind. There was even a faint roar in the air. The power of this punch alone was enough to collapse a tall building. Before the strong fist hit Mu Chiu, the force of the fist had already blown Mu Chiu's hair, but the eyelids under the hair were calm and surprisingly indifferent. It's that annoying calm face again. Jin Xiang's face became even more ferocious. For some reason, he hated Mu Chiu's cynical and self-assured expression from the first time he saw him. How could such an expression appear in this cruel apocalypse where people eat each other? Die. An ice wall suddenly appeared in front of Mu Chiu, and Jin Xiang's huge flesh fist instantly penetrated the thick crystal blue ice wall and was about to hit Mu Chiu. Jin Xiang's eyes flashed with excitement, as if he had seen the bloody scene of Mu Chiu's flesh and blood flying everywhere. But at the moment when Jin Xiang's iron fist broke the ice wall, Mu Chiu raised the empty sword in his hand. A silver-white light curtain suddenly appeared on the blade, like an unbreakable solid shield blocking Mu Chiu. The fist hit the light curtain shield, and with a click, Jin Xiang clearly heard the sound of the arm bone breaking. But the light curtain in front of him still stood firm in front of Mu Chiu, like a soldier who would never betray. The blade vibrated violently, and a gorgeous silver-white blade once again crossed the sky. This time, only Jin Xiang's legs were cut off. The muscular man who lost his legs lay weakly on the ground, looking at Mu Chiu who was walking towards him step by step, holding his sister in his arms and holding a huge sword. His eyes were full of unwillingness. No, I am unwilling. Without that sword, you are nothing. Oh. Mu Chiu still responded indifferently, but the ferocious blade in his hand kept getting bigger in front of Jin Xiang's eyes. Maybe. This was the last voice Jin Xiang heard. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 55. The sand and dust were swept up by the powerful wind wave of the void sword, blurring everyone's vision. The team members could only vaguely see Jin Seong's sturdy figure falling to the ground after a flash of brilliant sword light. It was only in the invisible sand and haze that everyone could see that when the void sword in Mu Chiu's hand was inserted into Jin Seong's heart, an inexplicable energy was continuously extracted from Jin Seong's body, and finally all of it was transported into Mu Chiu's body along the blade. Correspondingly, Jin Seong's originally sturdy body seemed to be drained of vitality, and quickly shriveled and withered. When the last trace of strange energy in Jin Seong's body was drained, Jin Seong's gray and dark body also disappeared in the air like smoke and sand in an instant. Feeling the extra power in his body, Mu Chiu did not think about it and directly attached it to the body of the flame demon leader, the magic energy containing the bull talisman. After absorbing Jin Seong's huge force, Mu Chiu held Yu Qi in his arms, holding a 2-meter-long ferocious giant sword in his right hand, and turned around to look around. At this moment, the sounds between heaven and earth seemed to be blocked, and only the heavy breathing of the team members not far away could be heard in silence. The originally empty sand was now covered with corpses and blood, as if a carpet made of blood was laid. The blood in the pool of blood on the ground had not coagulated, and it was full of broken corpses and terrifying heads. Mu Chiu moved his feet slightly, and the pool of blood under him instantly condensed into ice, and then a narrow ice road appeared that could only be passed by one person. As Mu Chiu walked on the ice road, the empty sword in his hand also turned into silver-white silk-like flowing clouds, all merging into the white hole that appeared in front of Yu Qi's chest. The pink-haired girl in his arms trembled her eyelashes, as if she was still in a dream. When Mu Chiu walked out of the ice road, everyone saw that the domineering giant sword in the void had gradually turned into a stream of light and disappeared, and Mu Chiu was holding Yu Qi around the waist and slowly walked out. Mu Chiu. The team members were stunned for a moment as they stared at Mu Chiu, who was walking out of the sea of blood and corpses with a faint smile on his face. Delight, shock, amazement, admiration, doubt. A series of expressions appeared in the eyes of several people like a roller coaster. They had too many questions in their hearts that they wanted to say, but they didn't know where to start. Why did Mu Chiu's strength suddenly surge so terrifyingly? What was the origin of that ferocious giant sword? And why did the giant sword take out from Yu Qi's body? Several people looked at each other, and even the fat man who was poisoned had no time to take care of his injuries. Mu Chiu walked to Wei Ling, handed Yu Qi in his arms to her, and then walked to the fat man. A white halo appeared in Mu Chiu's palm, and then it entered the fat man's body. The fat man immediately felt the pain of the poison in his body gradually disappearing, and his face gradually returned to normal from the strange blue-black color. Lu Qingfei, who had been hiding in the fence, also brought Su Wen to the crowd and began to treat others. The first thing the fat man did after recovering was not to ask Mu Chiu, but to ignore the injuries on his body and the blood on the ground, and rushed directly to the pile of corpses in front of him, shouting with shining eyes, "Woohoo! We're rich!" Chen Weiguo dragged his scarred body to Mu Chiu at this time, looking at the mountains of corpses and blood not far away, and asked tentatively, "Mu Chiu, what are you doing?" And everyone looked at Mu Chiu at this moment. The reason is that Mu Chiu brought them too many surprises along the way. It can be said that if Mu Chiu hadn't existed, it would be hard to say whether they could survive the first trip. Mu Chiu had already had an explanation for everyone's questions. He turned to look at the girl in Wei Ling's arms and said, "It's Yui." What? Everyone quickly turned their attention to Yui, who was sleeping. Could it be that the reason why Mu Chiu's strength has skyrocketed to such a level is because of this seemingly weak and fragile girl? But isn't her ability related to the spiritual type? Mu Chiu smiled and stroked the girl's light pink hair, with a gentle look in his eyes. Yui is actually an awakener with twin abilities. Her other ability is to breed the giant sword called the Void. That giant sword can greatly increase the user's strength, and I was able to wipe out Jin Seong and others by borrowing the power of the Void sword. Through Mu Chiu's words, he shaped Yue into an awakener with powerful auxiliary functions to cover up the reason for his sudden increase in strength. Of course, the fact is indeed so. Another twin power user. Can it raise the realm of the awakened person by nearly a level? There is such a wonderful power in the world. Everyone looked at Yuichi as if they were looking at a rare treasure. Since that void sword can raise Muchu, an A-level awakener, to a level infinitely close to S-level. If an S-level or even a destruction-level awakener holds that giant sword, how much will his strength soar? Seeing the amazement in everyone's eyes, Muchu smiled bitterly and said, "Unfortunately, Yuichi's ability needs someone to sign a contract to activate it, and this contract can only be bound to one person." As he said this, Muchu opened his shirt in front of his chest, and a mark of the king flashing with a dim light suddenly appeared on his strong and upright chest. "Is that so?" Everyone shook their heads and sighed, but they also felt that it was reasonable. If such a powerful power could be possessed by anyone, then Yuichi would really become the object of competition among all forces. In any case, this time it is all thanks to you, Muchu. Without you, I'm afraid it would be difficult for us to get here. Chen Weiguo had a simple smile on his face, and it can be seen that he was sincerely grateful to Muchu. The other members of the team also expressed their gratitude to Muchu. After all, Muchu had saved their lives several times. Even Lu Qingfei had to admit that Muchu played a much greater role in the team than she did. Muchu did not refuse the thanks from everyone, but replied meaningfully, "I also want to thank you for taking me on a pleasant journey." The experience along the way made Muchu feel quite interesting. If he were the Flame Demon Lord, he would not have seen so many beautiful scenery along the way. But Wei Linger was not polite and snorted, "It's because I have a good eye for people. It was all my efforts to bring Muchu in." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 56. Just as the team members were talking enthusiastically, a wailing sound came into everyone's ears not far away. Everyone looked over and found that the source of the sound was Song Konghua, who had betrayed them and fled alone not long ago, but was nailed to the ground by the flying knife man. Song Konghua was not feeling well at this time. His thigh was pierced by a flying knife, which was also coated with poison. The poison quickly flowed through his thigh and passed through his body. The severe pain in his body made him unbearable. Because he was leaning on the other side of the fence, Song Konghua was not attacked by the zombies at the first time. Instead, after a period of fermentation, his body was about to be unable to withstand the torture of the poison, so he asked for help. Several people walked in front of Song Konghua, and the fat man holding a bunch of shining crystal cores in his arms immediately cursed, "Traitor who eats from the inside, I bought." Wei Linger naturally had no good feelings for the selfish villain who was greedy for life and afraid of death in such a crisis. She snorted and turned her head away. Muchu's expression was indifferent. He slowly formed a crystal blue dagger in his hand and walked towards Song Konghua. Song Konghua looked at Muchu walking towards him with a dagger in his hand. His expression was extremely terrified. With the severe pain of the poison rising up, he felt for the first time that the crisis of death was so close to him. He hurriedly looked at Lu Qingfei beside Muchu and said in panic, Qingfei, save me." When Lu Qingfei saw Song Konghua's unwillingness to fight, she could no longer hide her disappointment. She sighed and still stood in front of Muchu. Seeing Lu Qingfei standing in front of him, Muchu's eyes showed no surprise, but instead said playfully, "Are you going to stop me this time, my saint mother?" Hearing Muchu's slightly sarcastic tone, Lu Qingfei's heart was extremely complicated, and she said, "Muchu, Konghua is also a member of our team. And there are fewer and fewer awakened people in Yuhei base. Although he has done some wrong things, we can let him make up for his mistakes in the future. Chen Weiguo couldn't help but comfort him at the side. Mu Qiu, why don't we give Kong Hua another chance? They knew that with Mu Qiu's current strength, no one could stop him, so they could only persuade Mu Qiu to spare Song Kong Hua's life. Mu Qiu raised his lips, as if he had thought of something interesting. Mu Qiu sneered as he passed by Lu Qingfei and came to the dying Song Kong Hua. I seem to have said that if I do it again, I will make you die without a burial place. Mu Qiu's faint smile fell into Song Kong Hua's ears, which was undoubtedly the sentence of the god of death. In the face of life and death, Song Kong Hua no longer cared about dignity. Regardless of the serious injuries on his body, Song Kong Hua endured the severe pain and knelt down, kowtowed to Mu Qiu repeatedly. It is my ignorance that offended Boss Mu, considering that we have worked together, please spare my life. From now on, I, Song Kong Hua, will only follow your lead. Song Kong Hua was no longer arrogant at this moment. He kowtowed several times until his forehead bled, but he still did not dare to stop. After dozens of kowtows, Song Kong Hua looked at Mu Qiu with a trembling head covered with blood. Mu Qiu casually threw away the ice dagger with a faint smile on his face. I can promise not to kill you, but there is a condition. Don't let me see you again. Lu Qingfei and Chen Weiguo on the side immediately showed joy on their faces when they heard this. Although Song Kong Hua was expelled from the team, it was better than losing his life. Song Kong Hua was also extremely excited. No matter what, his life was saved. In his heart, he was secretly thinking that when he returned to the base, he must sue Mu Qiu to the law enforcement team for killing his colleagues. By then, the evidence was conclusive. Under the deterrence of the top leaders of the base, Mu Qiu would have to lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die. But then, Song Kong Hua's right half of his body suddenly numb, followed by a piercing pain. Ah! Song Kong Hua screamed heartbreakingly, and saw that the right half of his body was neatly cut off, and the missing body part was still bleeding. Mu Qiu took back the condensed ice knife in his hand without any expression. At this moment, the blade of the ice blade was stained with a large amount of blood, which looked magnificent and strange. Mu Qiu acted very measuredly, perfectly avoiding the vital parts of Song Kong Hua's body, so that even if half of his body was missing, he would not die immediately. I said, I won't kill you. Mu Qiu turned around and smiled at Lu Qingfei and Chen Weiguo. The bloody smell here is too strong, and it will soon attract the attention of the zombies around. If you don't want to die, leave quickly. His face still had that handsome smile like a spring breeze. But in the eyes of Lu Qingfei and Chen Weiguo, Mu Qiu's smile was no different from the devil's smile. The two looked at Song Kong Hua, whose half of his body had been cut off. They saw that half of his body was twisted in pain. The blood had already gathered into a pool under his body. The only remaining eye was almost bulging out due to the severe pain. The forehead was soaked with sweat beads as big as soybeans. Tears were pouring down, and the pupils were full of horror and fear. Chen Weiguo shook his head at Lu Qingfei. Song Kong Hua, who looked like this, was better off dying than living. Besides, this place would soon be visited by a large number of zombie heretics. In this state, Song Kong Hua would only become food for the zombies in a moment. Lu Qingfei looked at Mu Qiu's back with shock. What on earth did this young man go through to make his heart so cruel? His handsome appearance seemed to be just a shell, but his heart was just like a devil. Just when the team was still collecting the crystal cores left on the battlefield, a hill dozens of kilometers away, an elite team of more than 100 people was moving through the forest. This team was dressed in a black uniform, and their movements were agile and fast, unlike ordinary people. Even their weapons and equipment were world-class. The man who led the team was wearing a white suit, a pair of black-framed glasses, white hair, and an indifferent expression. Unlike other members who were swift and agile, the white-haired man's steps were quite slow. But what was surprising was that the white-haired man had just taken a step and his figure had appeared dozens of meters away. Wherever he passed, even the space felt a momentary vibration. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 57. The white-haired man had already covered a distance of tens of meters in a blink of an eye. Even though he was walking like a leisurely stroll, he still kept the subordinates behind him far away. Team leader. There was a sudden sound in the sky, and the white-haired man looked up. It turned out to be a humanoid figure with two wings on its back, waving its wings and hovering in the air, saying to the white-haired man below, "If we walk more than 10 kilometers further, we will enter the city center of Lanan City." Just as the white-haired man was about to nod, a rustling sound suddenly came from the grass beside him. Immediately afterwards, a pair of scarlet blood eyes flashed in the bush, and a huge wild boar burst out of the jungle with a pair of ferocious tusks. And the target of this wild boar was clearly the white-haired man walking at the front of the team. The wild boar's tusks shot straight into the sky, stained with traces of blood, and the wild boar's physique far exceeded the average level. Just one impact was enough to smash through a house. This turned out to be a powerful alien beast with an A-level alien energy. The strong air wave carried the huge body of the wild boar and swept towards it, but the white-haired man seemed to be unaware of it and said, "Has the specific location been confirmed?" The white-haired man pushed his hand to hold the frame, and at the same time, the huge impact of the wild boar came. But just when the ferocious tusks of the wild boar were about to hit the white-haired man, the space around the white-haired man was distorted for a moment, and the white-haired man actually disappeared in place. The wild boar's blow missed the target and hit a giant tree behind. The fangs were deeply stuck in the tree. Just when the mutated wild boar looked confused, the white-haired man was already standing on the wild boar's broad back. The white-haired man pulled out the two sword hilts from his waist, held them with both hands, and two laser beams shot out from the handles. The white-haired man turned his wrist, and two bright laser beams penetrated the thick neck of the mutated wild boar. The man's body flashed, and the next second he appeared on the flat ground not far away, holding a blue crystal core in his hand. The light was scattered through the gaps between the leaves. The white-haired man's face was expressionless, and only a curtain of light flashed through his black-rimmed glasses. The huge body of the mutated wild boar crashed to the ground, and the blood from its neck sputtered out like a fountain. The awakened person flying in the sky held a map in his hand and considered, the approximate location should be determined now. The white-haired man stopped, looked at the law enforcement team members who were still rushing towards him in the distance, and ordered, "Now notify the surrounding search teams to suspend all tasks and arrive at Lanan Central Square within half a day to gather." Yes. There was nothing unexpected about the awakened person above the airspace, and he also believed that the surrounding searcher teams would not disobey this order. Because, this man is one of the very few S-class awakened ones in the base, and he is also the captain of the law enforcement team of the 3rd Brigade of Yuhei, Ji Yufeng, who is known as the White Death. In a convenience supermarket near the outskirts of Lanan City. The fat man was staring closely at a boiler in front of him, with a stream of saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. Inside the alcohol boiler were some packaged food similar to canned luncheon meat left in the supermarket. These days, the team members have been searching for resources in the ruins, and they have to be alert to dangers that may appear at any time. The food they eat is all instant biscuits and canned food. This made the gluttonous fat man very greedy. After arriving at the supermarket, he immediately suggested that the exhausted people use the alcohol boiler and ingredients in the supermarket to make a simple hot pot meal. Chen Weiguo walked from the shelf with a few cans in his hand. When he saw the fat man staring at the boiler and salivating, he reminded him, "Don't be careless. Since we came to this neighborhood, there have been fewer and fewer zombies around. This is already close to the city center. It stands to reason that there must be a lot of zombies in groups. Something is wrong with this situation now." When the fat man heard this, his fat body immediately trembled. He suddenly remembered the strange baby he had encountered at the Third People's Hospital of Lannan City. Although the crises he encountered later were more terrifying than that of the strange baby, the terrifying atmosphere in the hospital that night made Fatty unforgettable for a long time. At this moment, Wei Linger, Lu Qingfei and Su Wen also walked out of the store on the other side. Different from Fatty and Chen Weiguo, the three women had changed their clothes, and even their hands were packed with brand-name clothes and luxury cosmetics. I'm so lucky. This supermarket hasn't been raided yet. The faces of Wei Linger and the other three girls were all filled with joy of harvest, and they didn't look tired at all. For things like shopping, girls seem to be born with some kind of buff and will never feel tired. Wei Linger came over carrying gorgeously packaged clothes. She only saw Fatty and Chen Weiguo squatting on the ground. She couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Where are Mu Qiu and Chi Chi?" The fat man had a look of envy on his face, and complained in a sour tone, "Where else can we go? Of course we have been to the world of two." In another store in the supermarket, Mu Qiu walked in front with his hands behind his back to observe, while Chi Chi followed closely beside him. Although after a few days of getting along, Chi Chi and Wei Linger had become familiar with each other, but due to the binding effect of the rat charm, she still subconsciously wanted to stay with Mu Qiu. Mu Qiu naturally wouldn't mind, after all, Yui's life could be said to be created by him. Yui was a weapon in his hand, and a power that belonged to him alone. Mu Qiu would never give it up at any time. Just as Mu Qiu was admiring the dazzling array of goods on the booth, Yui stopped in front of a counter. Mu Qiu looked over and found that the product on the counter was a pink rabbit doll. Mu Qiu walked to the booth and stretched out his palm close to the glass. Red mist flashed from his palm, and a round hole was immediately dissolved on the glass. Mu Qiu took out the rabbit doll and handed it to the girl. Yui hugged the pink doll blankly with an inexplicable look in her eyes. Mu Qiu smiled and rubbed the girl's light pink hair, which was as soft as cherry blossoms. After stretching, Mu Qiu planned to go back and see what the fat man was doing. Qiu. Just as Mu Qiu took a few steps, a girl's ethereal voice suddenly came from behind him. "WWW." Mu Qiu turned around and saw Yui holding a pink doll in her arms. She used her hands to turn the red rope into a pattern and put it on her chest. The corner of the girl's mouth was even rarely smiling. At this moment, it was like cherry blossoms blooming. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 58. On Chi Chi's chest stands a suspension bridge made of red flower rope. The dusk sunlight shines in through the window, and the corners of the lips on the girl's flawless and pretty face are raised with a bright and moving smile. I have to admit, Chi Chi looks beautiful like this. At this moment, Mu Qiu narrowed the corners of her eyes, looked in another direction, and at the same time, a slender hair-like ice needle popped out with her hand. The ice needle streaked through the air as fast as lightning, and instantly hit a disc-shaped flying object by the far window. With a thought in Mu Qiu's mind, an invisible force of thought directly took the disc over. Monitor. Looking at the disc-like aircraft in front of him, the camera in the center had been destroyed by the ice needle launched by Mu Qiu, but underneath there were a row of mechanical suction cup tentacles with extremely strong adsorption force. It was these tentacles that drove the circular aircraft just now. The plate hangs outside the window. Mu Qiu looked out the window again, and there was nothing there. Mu Qiu frowned, and then took Chi Chi back to the foyer of the supermarket. This should be a surveillance device modified from a drone. In the foyer, Chen Weiguo dismantled the disk device into pieces, but in the end he could not analyze any useful information. There was no way, after all, Chen Weiguo was just an authentic migrant worker before the end of the world. Even though he had gained some knowledge and experience in the past 2 years, he was confused when it came to analyzing these high technologies. After watching for a long time, Chen Weiguo could only hold back one sentence: it seems that we are being watched. We shouldn't stay here for a long time. Listening to your words is like a speech. Mu Chiu nodded and looked at the others. Wei Linger also nodded. No matter what the other party's purpose is, we should be more vigilant at this time. The fat man held the unfinished hot pot in the bowl and screamed, "I'm on my way again," without even filling my stomach. But while several people were discussing, a communicator in Wei Linger's arms rang. Wei Linger's eyebrows were slightly curved. This communicator was a dedicated line for contacting the base. Under normal circumstances, the search team asked Yuhei for help. It was rare for calls from the opposite side. After it was connected, a vague sound suddenly came from inside, mixed with several strings of current sounds. Only Mu Chiu heard the message clearly, and when he heard a familiar word, a light flashed in Mu Chiu's eyes. After a short conversation, Wei Linger put down the communicator and sighed to the team, "We are busy again. There is news from above that all the teams currently performing search missions in Lannan City are ordered to arrive at the central square of Lannan within half a day. It seems that this time is another big task." As soon as this statement came out, the team members present were all amazed and inexplicable. "Why? When we came out this time, we were almost wiped out. What the hell is this up there?" Among them, Fatty's reaction was the most intense. After all, this search mission could be said to be a real escape from death. From the strange baby in the hospital at the beginning, to the shock at the survivor hotel, to the subsequent ambush in the mine, every incident can be said to be unprecedented, and normally far beyond what a B-level team like them can experience. After finally getting through the accident without any danger, Fatty now just wants to have a good rest and return to Yuhei base to be free and happy. The ruins of the city are full of dangers, and it is simply not a place for humans. If it hadn't been for the unfinished task that Lu Qingfei entrusted to the team from her superiors, I'm afraid the team would have gone back home and left Lannan City, a place of right and wrong. And when I heard that so many teams were required to be dispatched to carry out the mission together, didn't it seem obvious that this was a dangerous and fatal mission? Whoever wants to go on this mission can do it. Anyway, I won't go there again. If you ask me about it then, just say that I am seriously injured and can't live anymore." As soon as the fat man waved his hand, he planned to give up his job. Wei Linger had known he would say this, so she sighed softly and said, "The person who issued the summons mission this time is Ji Yufeng from the law enforcement team." Ji Yufeng. That white god of death, how could he leave Yuhei and come to Lannan City? Oh my god, why is that evil star here? It seems that I can't run away this time. The fat man knelt down and roared to the sky, going crazy. When everyone heard the name Ji Yufeng, they were suddenly shocked, and there was even a hint of panic in their tone of voice. Sensing that everyone's reaction was a bit strange, Mu Chiu looked at Wei Linger with questioning eyes. Wei Linger explained in due course, Ji Yufeng is the captain of the law enforcement team among the 3 teams in the Yuhei security zone. Because of his ruthless style and equal treatment of awakened people, Yuhei base has maintained the unity and coexistence of ordinary people and awakened people. It can be said that Ji Yufeng is the cornerstone of order in Yuhei base. Hearing Wei Linger's explanation, Mu Chiu nodded, but he still didn't understand why others were so frightened when Ji Yufeng was mentioned. Even concubine Lu Qing of the Holy Mother seemed to be a little resistant. Wei Linger added, "But it is precisely because of the ruthlessness of his methods that once an awakened person violates the order of Yuhei, he will immediately be severely hit by Ji Yufeng. There are already no less than 2 digits of awakened people because of this. He violated the order of Yuhei base and was executed by Ji Yufeng himself. He was indifferent to the survivors, and even more ruthless to the awakened ones. Coupled with his powerful and terrifying abilities, he was also dubbed the White God of Death. Everywhere it passes, there is killing, just like the sickle of death reaping and slaughtering life." After hearing Wei Linger's explanation, Mu Chiu finally understood why Fatty and others changed their attitude towards Ji Yufeng. With Ji Yufeng's ruthless character, if he was caught with some leverage, he would not be bitten to death like a mad dog. The fat man interjected, I heard that this Ji Yufeng hates all awakened people because his family was tortured and killed by awakened people with supernatural powers. But the irony is that he also awakened his supernatural powers not long after. The fat man seemed to really have no good impressions of Ji Yufeng, and suggested, how about our team don't go, and then we will say that we were attacked by a group of zombies on the way. Wei Linger helplessly replied, the order just came from above, asking us to gather at Lannan City Center Square, and the final location where the mission will be carried out. A flash of throbbing emerged from the depths of Mu Chiu's pupils. It's called Daishanti Entertainment Club. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xian Yu. Chapter 59. In a street in the center of Lannan, two heavily armed off-road vehicles were speeding past. There were scrapped vehicles everywhere on the street. The walls of the high-rise buildings on both sides were rusty and smelled of decay. The asphalt ground was scorched black and mixed with mottled blood. The fat man sat in the driver's seat and drove the car. He turned to Mu Chiu and the others behind him and said, it's strange, how come there are fewer and fewer strange things along the way? The weird things Fatty calls are those high-level heretics that are different from ordinary zombies. Since they drove all the way here, although there are still a lot of zombies along the way, they have not seen any high-level zombies above Class B. At this moment, several ragged zombies roared out from the corner. But the fat man was not afraid at all when he controlled the huge off-road vehicle. He stepped on the accelerator and ran over it. How could a few ordinary zombies withstand this violent impact? They were instantly knocked to pieces and their flesh and blood flew everywhere. The two off-road vehicles sped down and soon arrived at their destination, Lannan Central Square. The entire square seemed unusually empty, with only the powerful hum of car engines echoing. It wasn't until they arrived at the center of the square that the team finally discovered a team of hundreds of people stationed here. It's from the law enforcement team. When Fatty saw this team, he warned loudly, no wonder those high-level zombies in the nearby streets have disappeared. They should have been wiped out by these evil stars. A dozen military green tents were stationed on the ground, and several bonfires were rising not far away. A human team of hundreds of people was stationed majestically in this large open-air square. Mu Chiu looked at these law enforcement soldiers uniformly dressed in black with great interest. Although there are only a small number of awakened people here, the rest of the human beings have obviously received special training. They are strong and full of blood. They must be special forces before the end of the world. After several people got out of the car, a man wearing a military hat walked out of the law enforcement team. After confirming everyone's identities, the man in the military hat led the team to a bonfire in the center of the square. A group of awakened people had gathered near the tent near the bonfire. The first person was wearing a white suit, with white hair and a delicate face. He looked extremely indifferent. Even when he saw Mu Chiu and others arriving, he did not make any move. Wei Linger and a few people found an open space next to the campfire to sit down. It seemed that many search teams around them had just arrived. The fat man whispered to Mu Chiu from the side, this guy with a dead face is Ji Yufeng, the captain of the law enforcement team. Don't let him get caught easily. This guy treats awakened people much more harshly than zombies and so on. After hearing this, Mu Chiu looked at Ji Yufeng who was sitting not far away. The law enforcement captain known as the White Death also reacted very sharply. He turned his head the moment Mu Chiu looked at him. Ji Yufeng looked at Mu Chiu with his emotionless eyes. Mu Chiu was stared at by this cold gaze and was not afraid. Instead, she raised the corners of her mouth and responded with a peaceful smile on her face. At this moment, a rapid engine sound came from the distance. I saw a cool and luxurious convertible sports car speeding towards me from the other side of the street. A richly dressed young man stepped out of the car, wearing sunglasses and a beautiful hairstyle. At first glance, he looked like an aristocratic young man out for fun. Behind him were also several young men dressed as playboys, but when it came to the image of a slut, they were far inferior to the man in sunglasses who led the way. The man in sunglasses walked up to the crowd, took off his sunglasses and said calmly, "Good morning everyone, the incense hunting team is here to report. I am very happy to see that all old friends have arrived here safely." The man in sunglasses seemed to be quite familiar with the team of searchers present. When he saw Ji Yufeng, who was wearing a white suit sitting in front of the tent, his face showed even more surprise. He stepped forward and complimented, "Brother Ji, why are you here in person? What task can you give us, and our team can help you handle it properly?" Ji Yufeng naturally didn't take advantage of this flattery, so he just gave the man in sunglasses a cold look. The man in sunglasses felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave, and he suddenly shivered. Seeing that the flattery was slapped on the horse's leg, he did not dare to say anything more. The man in sunglasses turned around, and when he looked in the direction of Mu Chiu's team, a delighted smile suddenly appeared on his face. I saw him running up to Wei Linger and Lu Qingfei in a hurry, showing a smile that he thought was very charming. "Isn't this the charming Miss Linger? We are really destined. Even in the horrific ruins of the city, the goddess of fate still allowed us to meet here. This is such a great fate." After saying that, he actually bent down and knelt down to take Wei Linger's hand. Wei Linger had a look of obvious disgust on her face. She avoided the man in sunglasses' hands and scolded angrily. "Chun Nan, I have no connection with a playboy like you. It's a pity that you didn't die in the hands of zombies." Seeing that this move was ineffective against Wei Linger, the man in sunglasses turned his attention to Lu Qingfei. Of course, the same routine was still ruthlessly rejected by Lu Shengsheng. The fat man looked at the man in sunglasses with disdain and explained to Mu Chiu, "This pretentious man is called Chu Nan. He was a typical second-generation rich man who was uneducated before the apocalypse. After the apocalypse, this guy actually awakened his superpowers. Fortunately, there is order in Yuhei to restrain him, otherwise I don't know how many girls would suffer." Virgin, Mu Chiu was stunned. "Hey, Lao Chen, you are here." Just then, a search team in work clothes walked towards Chen Weiguo. The age of these people was around 40 or 50 years old, and some of them were wearing yellow safety helmets. This outfit looked like they had just walked out of the construction site. When Chen Weiguo saw this group of people, he also smiled, "Old Li, old Zhang, you are here too." The leading worker put his arm around Chen Weiguo's shoulders and grinned, "It's been a while since we've been together. After all, we were all workers together back then." Then, he looked towards Mu Chiu and the others and asked in confusion, "Hey, why don't I see Kong Hua?" When it comes to Song Kong Hua, Chen Weiguo's smile obviously faded by 3 points, and he sighed, "Kong Hua is dead." "What?" Several workers seemed to know Song Kong Hua, and were also surprised to hear the news of his death. Chen Weiguo looked guilty, "It's my fault. I didn't keep an eye on Kong Hua. I clearly promised old Song to take good care of his son." Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 60. Mu Chiu calmly withdrew his gaze after noticing the sad atmosphere of Song Kong Hua's death mentioned by several workers. Song Kong Hua provoked him, and Mu Chiu killed him casually. It was that simple, no regrets, no regrets. Suddenly, Mu Chiu felt a breath approaching him. "Little brother Mu Chiu." A soft bump hit Mu Chiu's firm back, and a charming voice entered Mu Chiu's ears, and the air was filled with a faint floral fragrance. A pair of delicate and flawless jade hands embraced Mu Chiu's shoulders, and a seductive red lip leaned against Mu Chiu's ear. "What a coincidence, you are here too. Mu Qiu, who had been prepared, reached out and held the white jade fingers on his shoulder, and chuckled, I don't remember that our relationship was so close, Lu Qianqian. Little brother Mu Qiu is really ruthless. It's a pity that I, your sister, have been thinking about you day and night for some time. Mu Qiu turned his head and saw an extremely charming and seductive face. Mu Qiu remembered that this person was the enchanting woman who competed with Wei Ling to win him over at the training ground that day. Her name seemed to be Lu Qianqian. Lu Qianqian was still wearing a red patterned cheongsam. Her charming face was charming and beautiful. The beauty mole under the corner of her eye added a bit of charm to her. The split thighs were looming and gave people endless reverie. How have you been in Sister Ling'er's team during this period? Lu Qianqian licked her tempting red lips. If you are not satisfied with Sister Ling'er, you are welcome to come to my sister at any time. My sister is always welcome to join me. At this time, Yuichi, who was wearing an orange dress, was weaving a flower rope in her hand and slowly placed the iron tower woven with the flower rope in front of Mu Qiu. Mu Qiu looked at Yuichi with a soft look and gently rubbed the girl's head. Lu Qianqian saw Yuichi's angelic face and couldn't help but stare blankly, with a flash of surprise in her eyes. Then she reacted and smiled charmingly, no wonder Mu Qiu disdains to associate with such an ordinary woman like my sister. It turns out that there is already such a beautiful woman around him. Chu Nan, who was dressed brightly, was rejected by both Wei Ling'er and Lu Qingfei, and felt frustrated. But then, a beautiful orange figure came into his eyes. Damn, there is such a top-notch. That appearance, that figure, that cold temperament. Chu Nan swore that he had never seen such a unique girl even before the end of the world. It was like she came out of the second dimension. He couldn't help but approach her to chat. This beautiful lady, may I ask you? Just as Chu Nan showed his gentlemanly demeanor as always, intending to capture the heart of this girl, he accidentally caught a glimpse of a charming figure. Lu Qianqian. Seeing Lu Qianqian's figure, Chu Nan's expression instantly became terrified, and his body trembled suddenly. Lu Qianqian curled her red lips and chuckled, oh, isn't this a virgin? What a coincidence that you were also summoned. Sister Qianqian, what you said is right. I am also a member of the Yuhei base. If the base summons me, Chu Nan, it is my duty. Chu Nan seemed to be very afraid of Lu Qianqian. He was submissive in front of her and no longer had any gentlemanly manners. Lu Qianqian seemed to have no interest in Chu Nan. She just said a word and then looked at Mu Qiu again. Brother Mu Qiu, if you change your mind at any time, you are always welcome here. Lu Qianqian did not hide her admiration for Mu Qiu at all. Before leaving, she put her hand on her lips and blew a kiss to Mu Qiu, followed by her slender and charming back. After Lu Qianqian left, Chu Nan seemed to have put down a heavy burden. He breathed a sigh of relief, and the fear hidden in his eyes slowly disappeared. Chu Nan straightened his back and looked at Yuichi, and a rose was in his mouth. He put on a confident smile again, Miss, I haven't asked for your name yet. As he said that, he couldn't help but pull the hand of the girl in front of him. Yuichi subconsciously moved closer to Mu Qiu. Suddenly, Chu Nan's extended hand was firmly clamped by another hand. Who? Chu Nan's eyes immediately became fierce, and his attitude towards men was completely different from that towards women. Mu Qiu narrowed her eyes slightly and smiled lightly, what do you want to do? UTM. Chu Nan was instantly annoyed. No one in Yuhei had ever dared to talk to him like this. But before he finished speaking, a terrifying scene happened. I saw a fluorescent blue mist surrounding the palm of Mu Qiu holding Chu Nan, and then it expanded into a gorgeous frost, spreading along Chu Nan's arm, instantly freezing Chu Nan's entire arm. Chu Nan was frightened. At this moment, even if he was stupid, he knew that he had met a tough guy, so he quickly pulled away. Elemental system. Chu Nan covered his frozen arm with a face full of fear. Mu Qiu didn't even look at him, and took Yu Qi's delicate hand and walked away. Ji Yufeng saw the scene from a distance, squinting his eyes and looking at Mu Qiu's back. Is he the Mu Qiu that Wei Ling brought back from the ruins? The man with a military cap beside him replied, now he has joined Wei Ling's team. I remember our people have been monitoring him for a while, right? While asking, Ji Yufeng looked at Yu Ichi beside Mu Qiu. Who is this girl? The subordinate beside him replied, there is no awakener in the base with this face. She should be a new member. Yu Ichi's face is as delicate as a porcelain doll from an anime. Once you see her, you will never forget her. No wonder the subordinates around him are so sure. Ji Yufeng nodded. There was still no expression on his cold face, but his eyes were fixed on the backs of Mu Qiu and Yu Ichi. A level. Ji Yufeng opened his lips and murmured. The moment Mu Qiu made a move just now, Ji Yufeng instantly sensed the powerful supernatural fluctuation. He was a little curious. How did an awakener who was only a low-level B-level awakener a week ago rise to the A level in just a few days? Pay attention to his actions. Ji Yufeng slowly instructed his subordinates.